Chapter 2. Do It Again. Shuichi was exhausted when he finally reached the dining hall. He didn't sleep last night. He spent the hours until morning, sitting up, walking in circles, showering, and constantly checking himself in the mirror. He was fine, though. The loop will repeat tomorrow.
Yeah, we're all here,
Himiko exclaimed as usual. Is everyone ready? Asked K1B0.
Of course,
Tsumugi affirmed, making Shuichi shiver.
My electro hammer is all recharged.
What an awful thing to get hit by. Shuichi's head still ached from the blow he received. Shuichi? Maki's voice made him jump. Don't fall asleep on your feet. It's an important day. It was an important day. Shuichi was already tired of dealing with, especially when he knew for sure what they were going to find at the hangar. Time loops. Not recommended. Okay, was all he could say in response. Let's go save Kaito. Maki narrowed her eyes at him, looking almost suspicious. Before we go, K1B0 thankfully interjected, there's something I want to share with you all. Last night, I went to the hangar to try to talk to Kokichi. You went to the hangar? Maki asked, which was an eerie echo of the response she had given Shuichi. Yes, I thought it would be preferable for him to release Kaito peacefully, K1B0 explained.
How did it go?
Tsumugi inquired, shifting her electro hammer in her hands. Shuichi sidled a step away from her, trying to keep his focus on K1B0. It went about as well as I expected. There was no response at all, the robot sighed. But I did witness a few things. There. That's where it was. All Shuichi needed to do was learn everything here. And then he could spend the next loop at the hangar.
What did you witness?
Himiko asked, with an undeniable note of nervousness. Please, Shuichi added, staring at him intently. Tell us everything. We should go there with no doubts holding us back. K1B0 seemed a little taken aback at his intensity, but he nodded. Right. It may delay us for a few moments, if that is okay. First, what's relevant to our mission is that while I was trying to speak with Kokichi, I saw one of the exosouls previously protecting Monokuma enter the hangar. I made sure to stay out of sight while I watched. Neither the alarm system nor the electric barrier reacted to the exosoul's presence. Tsumugi hummed.
Does that mean the alarm system and the electric barrier don't work on the exosouls?
Considering it's where the exosouls are stored, that would be a safe assumption, K1B0 agreed. The second thing I saw is a little less related, but I saw Himiko carrying a black case into the hangar. All eyes immediately turned towards the mage, who froze like a deer in headlights.
You did?
Himiko squeaked indiscreetly.
What were you doing, Himiko?
Tsumugi asked her.
Why were you at the hangar?
Why were you at the hangar? Maki questioned as well, though her general aura was about 10 times more intimidating.
I was giving something to Kaito,
Himiko explained stiffly.
I couldn't sleep last night, so I decided to go on a bit of an evening stroll. Kaito called out to me, and he asked me to go get something for him.
You spoke to Kaito? Shuichi demanded in alarm. Last night. I'm assuming this was before Kibo went to the hangar and saw the exosoul.
All he told me to do was to get him one of the black cases from Maki's lab,
Himiko said, shrinking away from the assassin's dark look.
And he told me to bring just one crossbow arrow. He said he was going to disable Kokichi.
Shuichi stiffened. Horror coursing through his veins. Don't you worry. I'll do something about all of this. That's a promise. You guys are all working so hard, so I can't just sit back and relax. Part of Shuichi wanted to run straight to the hangar. His legs screamed at him to move, to get to his friend as fast as possible before Kokichi could retaliate against him. But his body remained firmly in place. Shuichi knew that, logically, it was far too late to save Kaito. This time, he reminded himself firmly, I'll always have another chance later. He got used to this fast. Maybe dying affected him in more ways than one. We shouldn't waste any time then, K1B0 announced, drawing Shuichi's attention back to reality. Kaito could already be in need of serious aid. Let's go, said Maki, rushing out of the dining hall first. Everyone else followed closely behind, their footsteps now quickened with urgency. Shuichi let out a sigh, knowing perfectly well that whatever they did was now futile. 6 times the charm, said no one ever. Instead of staring blankly at his ceiling and trying to settle back into functioning as a human being, Shuichi was entering the corridors that led to the exocell hangar. He had staked out here for a while, and as Himiko said, she did come here for an evening stroll a little while after the nighttime announcement. She did talk to Kaito, and soon returned with a large black case for him. The green exocell hadn't left its post yet. Shuichi was sitting against the wall by the bathroom window, simply waiting for something to happen. Kaito was eerily quiet in there, and as much as Shuichi's heart ached knowing he was willingly allowing whatever was happening next to occur, he didn't want to do it over again. While he was sitting there, he had been trying his best to figure out why Samugi would kill him. The thought had been haunting him ever since it happened, which felt like light years ago, despite it only being, 1 night ago? Understanding time in a time loop was confusing. It was 2 attempts ago. How about that? One of the most plausible theories he had was that she was alarmed by the notion that he was going to try to stop what happened in the hangar. For some reason, she wanted this murder to happen, even though Shuichi was fairly confident that she wasn't the culprit, or even involved. Why? She wanted to stop the killing game as much as everyone else. Why did she go as far as to kill Shuichi? To keep him from saving Kaito? Did she assume that Kokichi was the one to die? Maybe she was trying to keep Shuichi from saving a remnant of despair, the mastermind's life. Shuichi couldn't exactly say that he was very fond of the measures she took to keep that from happening, but it was the best explanation he could come up with. That, or she had simply been looking for an excuse to kill. Hell, maybe she had some hidden, twisted part of her that adored the killing game, like Kokichi claimed to have. Shuichi really wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, though. He'd have to keep an eye on her, he decided. Stop the murder first, and maybe figure out what Samugi's deal was if he had time afterwards. All of a sudden, Shuichi saw a flash of gray out of the corner of his eye and turned his head. These corridors were quite long, so he doubted anyone would be able to hear those two. But he saw K1B0 walk past and make a direct right turn to head to the shutters. This must be when he tries to negotiate with Kokichi, Shuichi realized.
Hey-yo! Oh, good. You're still alive.
The voice made him freeze. It was a voice he hadn't heard in days, but its ominously cheerful tone felt like a physical attack on his heart. Kokichi Oma, remnant of despair, and mastermind of this killing game. Shuichi didn't care to move. He could hear the two of them through the bathroom window, and he didn't want to imagine what might happen if he was caught here.
Just wanted to check in on my second favorite hostage, Kokichi sneered. I was worried you'd keeled over and died. But you didn't.
Kokichi! Kaito growled, and there was a sharp shuffle as, he assumed, Kaito stood. About time you showed up.
Aw, did Kaito What is that?
I had a delivery earlier, Kaito told him triumphantly. See? My friends are always helping me out. And if you don't let me go and stop this bullshit right now either, I'm busting out of here, and they're busting me out. Kokichi was quiet for only a split second before he started giggling. They felt so bad for you they gave you a toy. Isn't that sweet? Your pets are so loyal, Kaito. I'm impressed. They're not my pets, and it's not a toy. It's a crossbow. If you get to have the exosols, I can have this. I don't know. Seems kind of like you're playing unfair. You're bringing a crossbow to a fistfight. Where's your honor, Kaito? Your dignity? Shut up! Listen, man, I won't let you have your way anymore. Kaito snapped impatiently. I'll fight you to get out of here if I need to. Kokichi scoffed. What are you gonna do? Shoot me? Kokichi didn't think he could have chosen any worse choice of words. There was a shout of pain from the boy, and then a loud grunt as he assumed Kaito lunged at him. Shuichi listened nauseously as there was a muffled string of curses, the sound of a door slamming, and even more distant shouting. He couldn't hear much from the window anymore, so he assumed that Kokichi had tried to flee, unsuccessfully, further into the hangar. Actually, he couldn't hear anything because of the heavy, thudding footsteps coming his direction. The exisal! Shuichi realized, using the wall to support himself into a standing position. It's coming this way. It must be when it enters the hangar, so Kibo must be. As he suspected, K1B0 appeared from around the corner, on the opposite end of the hall, visibly alarmed. However, due to Shuichi's other lack of stealth and good hiding spots, their eyes locked for a solid second before K1B0 suddenly started sprinting towards him. Just in time, he managed to get around the corner, joining Shuichi's side against the wall, as the green exisal stomped right past them, moving seamlessly towards where K1B0 had just been. Shuichi realized with a sinking feeling in his gut that he might know why that exisal was on its way. Kaito stood no chance against that thing. What on earth are you doing here? K1B0 demanded in a low voice. How long have you been standing there? I'm... Shuichi trailed off, frantically clawing for a good excuse. I'm keeping lookout. I'm making sure, everything goes smoothly for tomorrow. I never saw you enter the hangar. K1B0 shot back, gesturing wildly in the direction where the exisal had just come from. I need to see what's going on in there, Shuichi thought, with a helpless glance down to the hall. I came in early, right when the nighttime announcement played. I'm going to go see what that exisal is doing. You what? K1B0 yelped as Shuichi began moving. That's much too dangerous, Shuichi! You're not even armed, and you look exhausted. Have you slept? I'll just take a quick peek, Shuichi promised, wasting no time in hurrying after the exisal. I'll stay out of sight, I promise. K1B0 did not look convinced, but he didn't dare shout after Shuichi. A good choice, even if Shuichi wasn't sure if the exisals could hear or not. His heart thudding painfully in his chest, Shuichi cautiously peered around the corner. The exisal was still in front of the shutter, the electric barrier crackling and pressing a yellow glow on the exisal's metal. He was faintly aware of K1B0 beside him, and the two of them watched as both the alarm and the electric barrier shut off. The shutter creaked and groaned before slowly beginning to open. Huh? K1B0 whispered. The alarm and electric barrier shuts off for the exisals? I guess. Shuichi hummed noncommittally. We could probably sneak inside right now if we wanted to. K1B0 shot him a horrified look. Did you hit your head too hard, Shuichi? You usually have such good judgment. That blow better not have messed with my head, Shuichi thought in alarm. The possibility that he might be experiencing after effects of such a hard hit hadn't even occurred to him until now. He mostly felt normal, aside from his obvious lack of proper rest. You should go back, Shuichi suggested, instead of answering. I'll follow you in a moment. I promise. I just want to see what's happening. I apologize, Shuichi. I don't know if I should leave you alone when you're exhibiting such odd behavior. K1B0 unfortunately shot him down. It'll be easier for one of us to spy than two, Shuichi reasoned back, eyeing the exosol worriedly. It was starting to move again, causing both him and his friend to flinch. Kibo, please, before Kokichi hears us. I can't leave you alone, K1B0 stubbornly insisted. Let's watch together. Just stay quiet. Knowing this wasn't a battle he had the energy to win, Shuichi gave in. He shuffled forward from his hiding spot and moved to peek into the hangar itself, where he could see Kaito and Kokichi staring up at the exosol in utter shock. What the hell? He heard Kaito sputter. Kokichi looked similarly nervous. Even more so, actually. The cockpit clicked, and it flung itself open. No, wait. It was pushed open. It was hard to see from the back, but luckily, Kaito's voice was loud enough for him to identify the person in the exosol. What? Maki? Both K1B0 and Shuichi exchanged looks with one another. What is Maki doing here? Shuichi wondered, as he saw Kokichi fumbling for something in his pocket. Without barely a moment's hesitation, Kokichi whipped out a remote, trying to scramble further away from the exosol and Kaito. There was a zip in the air, and then Kokichi let out another pained cry. This one, somehow worse than the last. The remote clattered to the floor, and Maki was quick to keep Kokichi from reaching for it, a crossbow of her own, already loaded and poised with another arrow. Don't move, Maki hissed, and for once, Kokichi actually listened, taking to one knee and glaring up at her from the floor. If you don't want me to end your pitiful life right now, then talk. That arrow was poisoned, and if you tell me everything about your plan, I might get you the antidote. Tell me why you would do this to us. Somehow, Kokichi had the nerve to laugh. Poisoned arrow? Wow, you really are. Some assassin. Just your style, huh? Maki took a threatening, looming step closer to him. Talk, or you die. What's the point of this killing game? Were you really just bored? Shuichi felt sick to his stomach. He was sure K1B0 would feel the same if he had one. Maki. So, that's why she didn't have the hammer. She hijacked an exosol and broke into the hangar. We were going to save him together, Maki. So why? I already told you everything! Snapped Kokichi, his thin frame tense, as he glowered at Maki. What else do you want me to tell you? My tragic backstory? Don't mess around with me! Maki shouted, her voice dripping with scorn. I'm sick of playing your stupid games! Why would you start the killing game? How many people have to die for you to be satisfied? But, she snarled, I guess it's just like you, remnants of despair, to enjoy such ceaseless killing! Maki roll, Kaito tried, but his voice was uncharacteristically quiet, as if even he was afraid to interfere with Maki when she was like this. What are you talking about? Kokichi breathed in what appeared to be momentary, genuine confusion. Remnants of despair? What's that? I don't understand anything you're saying. We need to stop this, K1B0 urgently whispered to Shuichi. If Maki kills Kokichi, hold on. Shuichi cut him off, his eyes trained intently on the brutal scene in front of him. But anyway, Kokichi hung his head, taking a deep breath before continuing. Why are you starting up the killing game when it should have ended? You already know it's all meaningless, and that I'm the mastermind. His voice dropped, and for just a second, Shuichi thought he heard honest uncertainty. Do you love killing that much? Maki's shoulders went rigid, and after a brief pause, Shut up, you asshole! Terror seized Shuichi's chest in cold, suffocating talons as he watched Maki pull the trigger. The killing blow. K1B0 darted past him, shouting something that sounded like, "Maki, stop!" and causing both Maki and Kokichi's heads to turn in shock. But there was one person who didn't falter at the sight of K1B0. Kaito's arm flew in the path of the small arrow, and Shuichi watched in horror as it tore through his coat sleeve, embedding itself in his skin. Poisoned arrow. Those words sang its cruel melody in Shuichi's mind. Pieces were starting to click together. The tiny hole in Kaito's jacket under the press. The poisoned arrow. There was no arm, but they were both poisoned. With what? What did she shoot them with? How long do they have? What? Maki inhaled as she saw what she had done. Kaito! K1B0 cried out, rushing to the astronaut's side. Ow! Kibo? Kaito looked earnestly confused. How did... What the hell are you doing here? Kokichi shouted at the robot, his gaze hardening into something that looked more like fury. Anyone else want to join the party? Himiko? Shuichi? Never mind that. K1B0 turned towards Maki, who had dropped the crossbow and was staring at Kaito's arm. What was the arrow poisoned with? Strike 9 poison, Maki replied automatically, her voice dry. Kaito, you idiot! Why would you do that? There's an antidote in Shuichi's lab. I'll go get it. Don't move! Yeah, you, do that, Maki roll. Kaito agreed, eyeing the arrow in his arm anxiously. Do it! Hurry! Maki didn't hesitate for a moment longer. She zoomed past Shuichi at speeds he didn't think possible, not even noticing him in her rush. Kibo, how did you get here? Kaito asked the robot, taking his eyes off of Kokichi. The shutter's alarm turns off when it opens, K1B0 explained. I originally stayed to monitor Shuichi, but I couldn't simply sit here and watch this happen. For the sake of hope, we can't allow anyone else to die. Shuichi's here? Kaito's head swiveled towards the open shutter, and Shuichi quickly ducked out of view, guilt stirring in his stomach. He was the one who insisted they watch everything unfold. Even if Shuichi would just be sent back to the start of the night upon somebody's death, he couldn't help but feel terrible for his poor actions now. It's not fair to use these time loops to escape consequences. Shuichi squeezed his eyes shut, pressing the heels of his palms against his eyelids. There was a pressure in his head, building and building, as his bottom lip trembled dangerously. I'm terrible. I could have stopped this from happening if I ran in there the minute it opened. Despite his guilt, Shuichi couldn't help but wish that the loop would simply restart already. He knew what he needed to do. He didn't need to see the rest. At least, Shuichi knew what he needed to know. He could start forming a plan of action to stop this murder from happening in the next loop. He might as well just let everything play out now, right? He didn't have a choice in the matter either way. Everything was set in stone, and he was sure there was no way to save both of them. He knew his lab all too well. There was only one available antidote for every poison. Someone, either Kaito or Kokichi, was going to die. And this time, it was all Shuichi's fault. No longer able to bear being here, where Kaito might die within the hour, Shuichi turned away from the opening shutter, his emotions starting to become overwhelming. Maki would be back any second, and he didn't think he'd be able to handle her, too. She'd ask what he was doing here as well, and then she'd wonder why neither he nor K1B0 had intervened. Kaito would wonder that too, and they'd realize that Shuichi willingly let this happen, knowing the consequences. He virtually killed his best friend with his own 2 hands by his lack of interference. It was selfish of him. He knew that. But Shuichi ran away. He ran all the way back to his bedroom, slamming the door behind him and collapsing onto his bed and burying his face into his bedsheets, unable to face the world. Exhaustion strained his body from his lack of sleep. Guilt and grief weighed heavily on his chest, straining his lungs as he tried desperately to gasp for air. Mixing with his renewed self-hatred, he couldn't help but wonder why it had to be him that had to do this. He should be delighted that he had the chance to save Kaito from dying and Maki from killing him. So, why did he feel so awful? Why did everything feel so helpless? He wondered, for only the briefest moment, that maybe, if he was the one to kill himself, it was hopeless. He couldn't do anything. Hope Speak Academy attendee or not, Shuichi really wasn't anything special. His classmates were slaughtering each other, and he wasn't doing anything to stop it. He sat back and watched it go down. He knew he needed to. He'd always have another chance the next loop. And knowledge was power, but that didn't change the fact that everything was actually happening. He felt the truest, honest pain in his soul when he saw his classmates hurting and getting hurt. He hated to admit it, but even Kokichi, the mastermind, and a remnant of despair, was difficult to watch getting hurt. It was difficult to simply dismiss his own feelings. Kokichi's hand had been so warm. Their time spent playing games together had been so real. Was it all an act, or did Kokichi enjoy his company as a remnant of despair? For the first time since this all started, Shuichi let himself cry. He cried as hard as his body would allow. He cried for his dead friends, his dying friends, and for himself, because he didn't know if anyone else would. He cried until he inevitably fell asleep, leaning halfway on his bed, with his knees on the floor and his hands weakly clenching the sheets. Ding dong! Ding dong! Ding dong! Instinctively, Shuichi shifted to cover his ears from the persistent sound. Ding dong! Ding dong! It didn't stop. Life comes at you fast, apparently. Groaning, Shuichi rose from his highly uncomfortable position, wincing as his entire body creaked. He stretched out his arms and back, glancing blearily around the room in an attempt to locate that irritating sound. Ding dong! Ah, someone was at his door. Shuichi partly contemplated simply going back to sleep, but he feared that the next measure his classmates would take would be to break down his door. So, with a heavy heart and a longing look at his bed, Shuichi dragged himself to his door. To say he was surprised to see all of his classmates standing there was an understatement. Almost everybody. Kaito and Kokichi were still absent. Shuichi! K1B0 exclaimed in relief. Thank goodness! You're okay!
You look terrible,
Sumuki commented.
Are you okay? At least he wasn't shredded by an exisal,
Himiko pointed out. Shuichi blinked at her, not still entirely comprehending reality. Was he in a new loop? Or was this the same one? Why did Maki look so shattered? Listen, there's no time. Grab your electro hammer, Kibo ordered him hurriedly. We're performing the mission right now. Shuichi stared at him, letting those words process in his mind. Why? You saw what happened, according to Kibo. Maki finally cut in. When I left to get the antidote, Kokichi said he was going to make the exisal attack you. Kibo ran out to protect you, and Kokichi locked the shutter again. Antidote? So she did come back with it. Did you give Kaito the antidote? Maki's already grim expression darkened. Kokichi stole it from him and drank it.
So we have to hurry,
Sumuki urged him.
If you can, Shuichi. If you need to stay here, that's okay too.
Sorry. I can come. Despite how much he really didn't want to come, Shuichi rushed back into his room to grab his electro hammer. It wasn't yet at full charge, but that was okay. Shuichi was sure he wouldn't be battling any exosols. With everyone armed, they raced back towards the exosol hangar, Dread following Shuichi like a stalking predator. The stars were still twinkling in the sky, no matter how fake they were. So, it was still nighttime. He must have only gotten an hour of sleep at most. Some sleep was better than none, he supposed. Maki was already gripping the electro bomb she had before they even reached the shutter. She had darted to the lead, and thus was the first one to make it there. Shuichi was the last, his body groaning in agony from the overexertion. That could wait, though. Maki hadn't yet triggered the electro bomb. Instead, she was holding it up and staring at the shutter in confusion. Shuichi could understand why. The alarm system was already powered down.
What?
Himiko stammered as she saw the lack of lights as well.
Why would Kokichi leave himself open like this?
Tsumugi murmured with a wary glance at her fellow classmates. Shuichi remained a few feet away from her, hurriedly pushing the phantom feeling of her electrohammer against his head away. Is this a trap? K1B0 worried. Trap or not? Maki hissed, suddenly brandishing a knife she had acquired from virtually nowhere. We're going in. Kibo, open the shutter. Yes, I'm on it. Giving the control panel a firm whack, K1B0 quickly overrode the electric barrier and opened the shutter. Honestly, Shuichi thought, he didn't know what else he was expecting. But just as before, there was blood. And just as before, Kaito's coat sleeve dangled, limply, from the 2 metal slabs. Seems like they were an hour too late. Ding dong, bing bong. Shuichi rubbed his eyes, staring up at the empty, nighttime announcement. Okay, that was fine. He was in a new loop, which means he had a fresh start on everything. He'd stopped the murder from happening, which meant he needed to stop Maki from going through with her interrogation. That meant that he needed to start moving now, though. He estimated he had roughly an hour before Maki made her move to the exosol hangar, and Kaito would be utterly screwed if Shuichi didn't do something now. As Shuichi left his bedroom, his tired mind was working overtime to try and piece everything together. K1B0's interference made everything a little more difficult, but Shuichi supposed he could make a somewhat clear picture with everything he got from last time. The key points, he thought, were this. Himiko delivered Kaito his crossbow. Kaito and Kokichi began fighting around the same time K1B0 entered the hangar to try to negotiate with Kokichi. And when Maki hijacked one of the exosols protecting Monokuma. Maki entered the hangar, shot both Kaito and Kokichi with the poisoned crossbow arrow, and then ran to find the antidote. This is where things got tricky, but if he guessed right, then he assumed that Maki returned with the antidote to find the shutter closed. She tried to give it to Kaito through what could only be the bathroom window, but Kokichi stole it and drank it. Those marks on the control panel must have been Maki's panicked attempt to get back to the hangar, clearly to no avail. That's where things got odd. If Maki successfully approached the control panel, then the alarm didn't go off, and in every loop where Shuichi didn't mess up the natural course of events, the alarm sensor was most definitely on. Somehow, Shuichi might have a solution to this. It was something he had been wondering about for a while, and although far-fetched, he might have an answer. An electro bomb. Kokichi set off an electro bomb at some point in the hangar, presumably after Maki fled. But doing this put Kokichi at a considerable disadvantage. There was one key thing that the electro bomb disabled: the hydraulic press's safety function. For some unfathomable reason, Shuichi was sure that Kokichi killed Kaito under the press. That was the only reason he could think of that Kokichi would trigger an electro bomb. In fact, he was sure it was an electro bomb, because in his last attempt, they arrived at the shutter when the effects of the device were still active. The exosols surrounding where Monokuma should have been were all still, as he had noticed on his way there, and the alarm sensors were all off. Especially in that attempt, Kokichi would have known better than to leave himself defenseless. Shuichi was really hoping that if she stopped Maki from entering the hangar, Kokichi wouldn't find the incentive to kill Kaito. Even though Shuichi still wasn't sure of the exact reason for that, he supposed that he could always check again later, if he really needed to. He'd just have to effectively get rid of K1B0 and carefully stay out of Maki's way. With luck, it wouldn't come down to that. Shuichi rang Maki's doorbell, consciously trying to not look too dead on his feet. It took a few moments, but the door eventually opened.
What do?
Maki cut herself off, as her expression morphed. Her eyebrows pinched, as her mouth remained agape for only a few seconds.
What happened to your face?
Excuse me? Shuichi asked, knowing fully well what she was talking about.
Were you crying?
Maki asked him bluntly. Crap. Was it that obvious? Shuichi hurriedly reached up to rub aggressively at his cheeks, hoping to clear any remnants of his previous breakdown. It's fine. Not important, Shuichi assured his friend unconvincingly. Maki was visibly skeptical.
You looked fine this morning. Did something happen?
Oh, you have no idea. Kind of. It's just... Can I talk to you about something serious? Please?
Sure,
Maki responded simply. She stepped fully out of her room and closed the door behind her, now standing in front of Shuichi.
What is it?
Not wanting to risk being interrupted by Himiko leaving for her evening walk, Shuichi gestured for Maki to follow him. Let's talk in the courtyard. It had been a while since he and Maki were under the stars together like this. The last time he had spent any time with Kaito or Maki was before the 4th trial, unless you could count the night after, but that was more of Shuichi awkwardly watching Kaito and Maki from the sidelines than it was spending time with them. How long have I been awake? Shuichi could only wonder. He hadn't slept at all in the 5th loop, the one after he was killed. And he only got an hour of sleep before being launched into this loop. That was, 12 hours at most? It felt like it had been so much longer. Maki, Shuichi began, trying to work out how he was going to word this. I know what you're planning to do tonight. Maki didn't give him a reaction. That was okay, Shuichi supposed. I wanted to ask you not to do it, Shuichi continued pleadingly. You already know that Kokichi isn't going to tell you anything, and I can't let you kill him, Maki. You know Kaito wouldn't want that.
What are you talking about?
Maki questioned. If it weren't for the fact that Shuichi had watched her plan in motion, he might have been fooled by her feigned ignorance. Might as well lay it to her straight. You're going to use an exosol to break into the hangar, and you're going to try to torture Kokichi for answers with a poisoned crossbow arrow. That made Maki flinch, though once the initial shock had passed, her eyes narrowed dangerously, and Shuichi didn't miss the way her shoulders tensed.
How do you know that?
Maki demanded lowly.
Do you want to die?
Taking in a deep breath, Shuichi lowered himself onto his knees, not unaware of the alarm on his friend's face. Then he pressed his forehead against the cold ground and clasped his hands together. Please, he begged fervently, his voice coming out as a pathetic, hoarse whisper. Please, wait until tomorrow. Shuichi couldn't see Maki's face, but judging from her silence, she was probably stunned. He could understand that. He hardly, if ever, got down on his knees and begged. But honestly, he was desperate. He didn't want to go into that hangar, knowing it was too late. Even if only a little. He just wanted to feel the hope that everything would be okay this time.
Stand up,
Maki snapped at him, sounding deeply perturbed.
Right now. Don't ever do that again.
Stubbornly, Shuichi didn't budge, Not until you promise you're not going to break into the hangar.
What makes you think I was going to do that in the first place?
Inquired Maki. When Shuichi didn't respond, she huffed.
I won't go to the hangar tonight, so get up.
Feeling weak with relief, Shuichi got back to his feet, trying to hide the redness of his cheeks. Hopefully, he wouldn't ever have to do that again, but at least he knew it worked.
Did something happen?
Maki asked him as he brushed himself off, her voice somewhat stiff with discomfort.
And how did you know about that?
I'll tell you tomorrow, Shuichi promised, though his words didn't come out very confidently. Once we save Kaito, it'll be easier to explain. Just this once. Please, trust me. Maki stared at him, as if she was trying to pick the truth out of his brain through the sheer power of her eyes. Shuichi refused to allow his resolve to waver, and he kept his own gaze on the grass below their feet.
You're difficult to say no to sometimes,
was what Maki said when she realized he wasn't going to budge.
Fine, I'll wait. But I am going to kill Kokichi one way or another. I won't allow the mastermind to get away with this.
Thank you, Shuichi breathed, hardly registering that last part. I'm sure Kaito can hold out for just one more night. He's Kaito after all. You know you can't keep him locked up for long. And he has faith in us, you know? I'm sure he trusts that we'll save him.
I guess so,
Maki agreed, her voice quiet.
Believing in others is something he tries to push.
Shuichi nodded. Also, you'll need your energy for tomorrow.
Okay, I get it. I told you, I won't do anything tonight,
Maki repeated, this time with a firm note of finality in her voice.
I take it you won't tell me what's wrong, so I won't ask. But after the mission tomorrow, you'd better tell me how you figured out my plan.
That was a fair trade. Shuichi sincerely doubted she'd believe him, but he'd cross that bridge if he got there. If he got there. There was the very real possibility that he was going to fail. Hopefully, that wouldn't be the case. I will, he assured her, hoping it would be true. Thank you, Maki. We'll save Kaito tomorrow. I'm sure of it. For the first time in a while, Maki gave him a small smile. After bidding each other good night, the two of them returned to their respective bedrooms. Shuichi slumped against the nearest wall the minute he was alone, blowing out a massive breath as he finally dropped the emotional mask he had been trying so hard to wear. He was still so unsure about everything. What if this didn't work? His initial theory was that if he took away Kokichi's motive to kill Kaito, which was Maki's original attack, then everything would be okay, but what if he was wrong? There was always the next loop, but Shuichi really wanted this to end as soon as possible. He was afraid of what might happen to him as a person if this continued on, because it was only his 7th attempt, and he already felt as if he was changing. That was going to be a difficult one to explain to his friends, how he was just going to tell them he was in a time loop and expect them to take him seriously. If he did tell them, what if they brought a hammer to his head again? Shuichi's hand subconsciously found its way to the side of his head, and he grimaced. Ugh. Too many questions, with too few answers. He didn't know if this was going to work. He didn't know why this time loop was happening. He didn't know what happened in that hangar after Kokichi drank the antidote, and he didn't know why Sumugi killed him. He didn't know anything. One thing at a time, he tried to tell himself. First, he would go clean up himself. He hadn't gotten the chance to wash his face yet, and it was starting to make him feel a little gross. Next, he should wait until he was sure that nothing was going to happen to let himself fall asleep or distract himself in any way. It'd be trouble if he let his guard down for even a moment, and Maki ended up going to the hangar anyway. Shuichi shot upwards, accidentally splashing water everywhere in the process. What if Maki went to the hangar anyway? It wasn't that Shuichi didn't trust Maki, it was more that he knew her. He had witnessed firsthand just how far she was willing to go to save Kaito and stop the killing game. Would Shuichi's pleas really work on a resolve like that? If Maki goes there tonight, I'm going to have to redo the entire loop. Shuichi did not want that to happen. Turning off his sink, he booked it out of his bedroom. He knew one surefire way to keep anyone from entering those corridors, and that was to stand outside their doors. That'd mean he'd have to be awake all night, and he risked questioning from his classmates, considering both Himiko and K1B0 were still going to try to enter the hangar. If he could keep anyone from going there, maybe things would turn out differently for once. What time is it? He wondered frantically as he ran through the courtyard, moving as fast as his legs would take him. If Himiko had already entered those corridors, then she was inevitably going to speak to Kaito. He saw no one as he slowed to a stop in front of the set of large doors, and he took a moment to catch his breath, cautiously scanning the path behind him. He supposed he'd find out whether he was early enough or not in just a few minutes. It'd be a lot harder to convince Himiko to turn back if she had already spoken to Kaito. Standing out here all night was going to be a hell of a challenge, especially considering what he had to do in the morning. But it was a challenge Shuichi was willing to face if it meant he could save Kaito.